All right.
Are we ready?
Ready.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Here they all come.
The fun has begun.
Yes.
Yay. So is it like they come into like it's a group Zoom, right? I should know that.
These are honestly, they're the most fun, as odd as that sounds.
Yeah.
Because it's
Really?
like, yeah. I mean, there's also the opportunity if we decide to go this route, like we could have people unmute and ask their questions live. So that's an option.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm in. Love
You
it.
can do it either way. All right. Well, we're going to give it just another minute and see if we get any more stragglers to come in. I know we had a large group that was going to be joining us. And we're just going to ask everybody to keep your cameras and your mics off right this second. And then when we get into the Q&A, we may change that. So, all righty. All right. Well, I want to welcome everybody. I have been super excited about this event. And when it came up that asked if they wanted me to host, I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm here. Asha, this book about broke me. It took me a really long time to read it, and not because it was slow or anything like that, but it was just one of those books that just ripped my heart piece by piece, stomped all over it, and then slowly stitched it back together, and has completely changed me. And I don't get to say that about a lot of books. So
Wow.
thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel like I shouldn't be laughing about a broken heart. But
oh no, it's totally.
I'm so happy that it resonated with you in that way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So y'all, if you have not had a chance to pick up Hurricane Summer, you are in for an absolutely exquisite, powerful, amazing read. And I wish I could be there with all of you when you finish that last page and put the book down, because that moment is something that will resonate with you. And this book is going to be one that you're going to carry around in your heart for a long time after you've closed the book, the cover, for the last time. So
that's an honor. Thank you. That is so wow.
So without further ado, y'all did not come to hear me tonight. You are going to hear from the lovely Asha herself, but we have a twofer tonight because we have the incredible, yes, I'm fangirling, Nic Stone, who is going to be moderating this evening. So ladies, thank you both so much for being with us tonight. Asha, for this book. Oh my God. I can't even, I gotta stop.
Kathleen, I'm bursting.
No,
thank
you. You're fine. All right.
Girl, get ready to burst some more. Cause listen.
Exactly. All right.
I love you guys.
Thank you. And everybody that's here tonight, thank you all so much for coming tonight, because without you guys being here, none of this would be happening. So thank you all for being here. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Miss Nic and Miss Asha. Thank you all so much.
Hey y'all.
Hey y'all.
Hey girl.
Hey girl. How you doing?
So okay, look, I was fine until I read this book, and then like I wasn't fine. But see, this is the thing, Asha. Like I'm annoyed, first of all, because you are so multifaceted and so talented. And so like we're going to dig a bit into your different facets and the way that you wrote this story, but don't be mad at me. I really want you to read from it. I'm gonna tell you what I want you to read. So page 8. Listen. So listen, I want all of you to get. Yeah, no, you're good. I want you all to get a taste of this amazing prose. The way that Tilla's voice just kind of sings off of the page this is one of those things that you can't be taught. Like you either have the voice thing or you don't. And homegirl, you got it. So turn to page 8.
This is like the highest honor. I just want you to know, like my inner child is fangirling right now. Okay, page 8. We're on page 8.
Page 8. I want you to start at when I was a child.
Oh my God, yes.
And read through the end of the chapter.
Oh my gosh, great part to start, by the way. I really love this part of the book. And this was actually written before I knew what this book was actually going to be, this paragraph that I'm about to read. This was before I even knew I was going to write a book. So when I was a child, my father was the most fascinating person I knew. To my young heart, everything he did compelled me. During the summer when we were younger, he would look after us in the daytime while mom went to work. And I recall using nap times as quiet opportunities to study him. On hot summer days, I would lie on the couch as my eyes tried to make sense of such a wonderful human being who seemed to have transcended human being. I was fascinated by my father. He was the Rubik's Cube I was determined to solve. I would watch in admiration as he sunbathed in the backyard, his Jamaican beaded chain the only thing to touch his chest. He was unaware of my peering little eyes, and I would fall asleep to the sight of his chest rise and fall under the rays of the setting sun. I experienced many sunsets this way, all of which confirmed that my father was pure, utter magic. The countless minutes, hours, and days we would spend together quickly became the same minutes, hours, and days that would shape who I was becoming. It seemed that I, by the grace of God, was a part of him. He was a ray of light that existed through some sort of magic grace in manhood. He was the hero in every storybook he had ever read to me. But all fairy tales must come to an end. My father was born in the countryside of Jamaica, and although he moved to Canada in his 20s, his heart never left the island. Not like mom. She moved to Canada when she was 12 years old and left all memory of her life in Kingston behind. But dad could never let go. Although he started a family abroad, Jamaica was the one he longed for when he was with us. She was his first love. It didn't matter that we had built a house. We were not his home. As the years passed by, his relationship with mom grew strained. Every day in our house became a battlefield of screaming and anxiety, and the constant fighting caused him to lose any interest he had left in our family and the picture we had worked so hard to perfect. Their relationship was chaotic, and Mia and I were no longer cute little girls, but growing young women. And he grew bored. As soon as the world didn't fall at his feet, he was gone as quickly as he came. When the bills became too high or mom became too much, when Canada got too cold or finding a regular job became too stressful, he would fly back to paradise, leaving us to mend the broken hearts he left behind. Every 6 months, he would come back like he never left, demanding to fit into the puzzle of our lives as if the pieces would still be the same. But they weren't. And neither were we. We were changed with every goodbye. The last time I saw him, the familiarity of anxious silence filled our house the way it did every Sunday afternoon. Silence on Sundays was the calm before every storm Mia and I were forced to witness. It was the prelude to the screaming, the yelling, the breaking things. The prelude to my mom telling him he was full of shit before slamming the door in his face. To him packing his bags and telling her to go fuck herself. Venomous words children should never hear their parents spew at each other. Words that cut deep and take away the little innocence you have left. Words that pierce through your heart and stay buried there forever. Words that teach you heroes don't exist. My nerves grow heavy as the seatbelt light turns on, pulling me out of my thoughts. Breathe, Tilla. The plane picks up speed, pulling my attention back. Faster, faster, faster. I look out the window as we rip down the runway, my heart pummeling against my chest. I reach down and fiddle with the necklace my father gave me on my 9th birthday, a tiny gold butterfly pendant that sits at the base of my neck. You're my butterfly, Tilla, he said when he gave it to me. You are soft, but you are powerful, just like a butterfly. The memory makes me nauseous as I press my head back against the seat. My father has been gone for 376 days and counting, but he said he would be back. He said he and mom would work it out. How is he doing? Has he missed us? Is he happier without Mia and me around? I am a vortex of mixed emotions. I dread the sight of him, but I ache to see him at the same time. I wish I could be like Mia, innocent to his broken promises, oblivious to the consequences of his absence, too young to know the difference. I wish the thought of him didn't hold me down and fill me with rage. I wish I didn't love him so much my heart might explode. The plane engine roars louder. Faster, faster, faster. Breathe, Tilla. And just as the plane lifts into the air, the inevitable truth drops to the pit of my stomach. Mom was right. You do get 2 birthdays. Today is mine.
Oh, chat. Like, listen, okay, y'all. So the book opens, for those of you who haven't read it, the book opens, like your opening 3 lines. I was like, this bitch here. Like, I was just like struck because you have this way of drawing the reader in very, very quickly.
Wow.
And I think that it's such a powerful thing because this isn't like your typical novel, right? So we're introduced to Tilla. Tilla is a Jamaican girl. She's Canadian Jamaican or Jamaican Canadian, like you are. And
Yes.
so my favorite thing though was getting to see Blackness kind of expressed in a way that I hadn't seen in a book before, right? So really one of my first questions for you, like I retitled this book as Black Girl Living because you see Tilla go through so many things, like she's processing so many things over this summer that she's in Jamaica. And I want to know when you decided that you were going to write this book, what was going through your mind? Why did you feel like this was the story you needed to tell?
Right. Oh, that's such a big question because this book came about, like, there's so many different things that came about to make this book a thing. I flew to LA for pilot season and I would always get callbacks, but would never book the role. And it was like I was going through this thing in my career where it had been so long since I had booked something, Nic. I remember constantly being devastated, like crying every weekend and just like, God, why? But it's odd because even though I was so devastated, I wasn't connected to the roles I was auditioning for. I just wanted to work, you know what I mean? But I never felt like the roles I was going out for at all were anything I was even interested in because they were always so limited. They were always very one-dimensional. They never really showed the heart and strength of like what I think my life is and a lot of the women of color that I know their lives are. And yeah, it honestly, I always say the story came from a space of feeling disempowered and wanting to take my power back. I really wanted to write the story myself. I was literally tired of playing the Black best friend. And I was like, I just want to see a coming of age story about a Black girl's humanity because I wake up every day and I feel human. Like, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes this idea of Blackness, it's almost like people are unable to see beyond it. Like our Blackness is what makes us beautiful. It is a core part of who we are ancestrally, what we, what our gifts to this world. But we also are human first. And I wanted to explore that. I wanted to see that. I wanted to play that. And so I was like, I'm going to write about it. I'm going to do that.
That is such a powerful, powerful statement. So like I talk frequently about like race and racism, but at the core of racism, sexism, homophobia is dehumanization. So the fact that you were able to write this Black girl as a human being honestly was astounding to me. One of my favorite things about the book was kind of the sex positive angle that you have here. Because in a lot of ways, Black girls were not permitted to be sexual because it's like, if you are a Black girl and you're sexual, you're fast, or there's something you're fulfilling some type of stereotype. I want to know why you decided to have this kind of sex positive angle in this book that you're writing. So like your intended audience was obviously it's a YA book, but was that what you were intending? Were you intending it for teenage girls?
I was definitely writing to teenage girls. And I think because I was specifically writing to teenage me. And it's interesting that you say the book is sex positive, which I believe it absolutely is. But even when I was writing it, I think a lot of this story revealed itself to me as I wrote it. I didn't know what the purpose of the story was when I first sat down. I thought to myself, well, I spent a lot of summers in Jamaica, and every summer that I spent there was magical. It was like entering a complete other world. And how do people not know about this? And why have I not seen this reflected on screen? That's where I started. But what the book became throughout the process, it really was a process of self-discovery, reflecting back on a lot of my own personal experiences, the women around me and how girls are so sexualized growing up. And once we step into our sexualities, it's almost like we're shamed for it,
Girl,
and as
yes.
I don't know how else to say it, but like it just naturally came because when you're writing a coming of age story about a young girl, that's what so many of us go through. So many of us have this awkward I always tell the story of like going to the mall when I remember going to the mall when I was like 12 or 13. And I remember the way that men would look at me differently. Like when I wasn't with my parents, it was like, oh, like, I feel like you shouldn't be looking at me this way. And also knowing that I'm stepping into almost like a womanhood, like I'm not a girl, but I'm not a woman. I'm in this weird in between space and no one is showing me how to navigate it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it just came naturally because so many of us struggle through things like that.
Yeah, I mean, but like one of the reasons I think we struggle through that is because of sexism, which is something that you just like
Right.
straight up tackle head on in this book.
Right.
Like we see kind of what misogyny looks like in Jamaica. We see the double standard is like smack on the page. It is completely
Yeah.
undeniable. And I
Right.
want to know why you decided to lean into that. Like this actually is kind of attached to another question, but answer that one first. Like the sexism piece. What was it that you were trying to convey about young girlhood, especially when it
Right.
comes to the way young girls are viewed by
Right.
men specifically?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And women as well, you know,
And
like
women as well.
the
Yeah,
jealousy and
absolutely.
stuff that can happen. I mean, I guess so much of Tilla's journey is my own. She makes a lot of choices I wouldn't necessarily make, but I could just relate to this feeling of like feeling disempowered and honestly just shame. I feel like unpacking Tilla's shame and her relationship with her father and how that was affecting her worth and how she felt about herself and the relationships that she chose to have. And, you know, even like later in the book, once people read it, like there's a moment where you see that like everything Tyson says has a hold of Tilla. It's in control of like every move she makes is based on wanting her father's approval. And I couldn't help but see the clear parallels between that and how she was with men in the book and how she was with, you know, her first love, falling in love, wanting to be loved. And this idea that like her feeling of wanting to be loved was so based in like needing a healthy masculine love. And so I think sexism just naturally became a part of the conversation. You know, it's a huge part of not only Jamaican culture, but Western culture.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing I wanted people to take away was like, I wanted it to be an honest look at how we treat young girls, you know, who are stepping into their sexual selves. So often we see that when girls are no longer loved and revered by their fathers or protected by the chastity of their girlhood, we fear their power, right? And so quickly we disempower young women. And I felt like growing up, that was so much of my experience, so much of the experience of the women around me. It's like we're not taught to know our power, you know? And so, yeah, sexism is naturally just a part of that conversation.
You're like a whiz kid. It is wild. Like just listening to you talk, I'm like gleaning so many amazing things.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
One of my favorite things about Tilla is like, and I'm interested to hear whether or not you feel pressured to be strong all the time, right? Because one thing I will say about Tilla is that I appreciated the fact that like there is some softness that you see in her. There's this vulnerability on the page that I don't encounter a lot in books about Black girls because we typically don't have the space to be vulnerable. There's this wall that we constantly have to have up really to just protect ourselves from like the ugliness of the world. How do your experiences with vulnerability, do they mirror Tilla's, or is she like something you wish you could be?
Right. That's a great question. Thank you for recognizing that about her, because that's one of my favorite things about her. And I completely relate to Tilla. I mean, my family can tell you I've been crying since the day I came out, and I've been crying nonstop since. Like, I'm a Scorpio. I'm very emotional, very in tune with my feelings. I feel very intensely. And growing up, you know, at school, that was definitely really hard because you get labeled as like, you know, the crybaby or like some sensitive, which growing up that was like not the thing to be.
Right.
Was be sensitive, you know, have thick skin, like that was sort of the narrative. And I was never that. I was always very emotional as a child. And you know, so much of me, of course, writing Tilla, like so much of me is in Tilla, and it was important for me to just show that level of a Black girl, because I think so often the expectations, as you said, for Black women, it's like astronomical. We're not allowed to feel, we have to be strong, you know? And so I wanted to show Tilla's vulnerability because I believe that it's her superpower. And I actually believe that her willingness to have an open heart to life, to show up, to love, to want to be better, you know, I think that's what makes her so beautiful. And the fact that she's flawed and she makes mistakes, and sometimes her open heart gets her into trouble. But I think that that is truly what makes her such a beautiful person. And I think that's something I've learned about myself too. So it was almost like a lot of my own healing went into this, because as I discovered and learned things about myself, I was like, okay, I want to share this. I want to teach this, you know?
Girl, like I should be taking notes, but it would look weird if I'm like sitting with my head down. I'm serious. You're so
Thanks, Nic.
full of this wisdom and this magic. And you just mentioned the word healing. And I wonder about this writing process for you, right? Because like when we kind of at the opening, you were talking about how in your acting journey, coming into this place where it was like all of these roles, they're not roles I actually want to play. Like there's
Right.
this very limited number of roles that Black girls are allowed to play.
Right.
And I wonder how much did writing your own story impact your own healing process? And I'm sure this isn't just with acting. This is like in life. Like how did writing help to heal you?
Wow, that's a great question. It gave me my voice back 1,000%. It helped me discover my own power. Like, I think everybody should write a book, because it really, like, first of all, the discipline that you need to write a book, girl, there was like for the first 6 months, I was just telling everybody, I'm writing a book, girl. I had like 1 page done.
Oh, I understand.
You know what I mean? And when you really commit to something and you have that discipline and you see it through, it's like, it's insane. So I think, first of all, it taught me how powerful I am, and that when I put my mind to something, I can do anything, you know? And we all can do anything. It's just like the discipline and the consistency that we need, right? So that was one thing. And in so many ways, it freed me. For so long, I always felt like I needed a yes from someone else. I needed a yes from a gatekeeper. I needed a yes from the shop, a yes from my agent, a yes from this management company. And this book was like, no. I believe that the reason I wasn't working was because God was like, right, you need to write something. And if you were working right now, you wouldn't be writing. So my purpose was to write. And I'm really glad that I showed up for that lesson. But I've confronted so much of myself with this book, Nic, as I'm sure you can relate. There's so much that, Eva, I was just saying to you, even up until this week, you're confronting the feelings of, you know, external validation and needing that approval from others and wanting to be liked and loved. Like there's so much that comes with this journey of putting a product out there. And so, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like I'm not the same person I was when I started writing.
Listen,
You
no,
know?
that's a very powerful statement to make. I think that anybody who is an aspiring writer, that's something that they should take into consideration. Like once you get to the end of a project, you're not about to be the same person.
Right.
But the beauty of that is that like you grow, your wings
You
spread.
grow.
Yeah.
You know what it is too? It's like self-acceptance, because you get to a point where you're like, okay, I have to accept me. I have to believe this is good. If I'm selling this to you, I have to stand behind this. I have to believe in my
Yes.
work. And it forces you to like stand in your purpose without fear, you know? You go through the fear first, and then you stand in your purpose.
Yes.
You know?
And I mean, look, it's the fear doesn't go away. So
Right.
my next question isn't specific to Hurricane Summer, but I was thinking about how you have these two very distinct roles now, right? So like you are an actor and you are now also an author. And I wonder how those things intersect. You clearly are not Tilla, like Tilla is Tilla and you are
Right.
Asha. And like,
Right.
but when you are playing a role, like in Riverdale, for instance, there's a pair of shoes that you're stepping into and kind of living as. How did you, like when it came to the writing process, how similar were these kind of two very different art forms, honestly?
The same, because it's the same God space that you step into when you decide to like empty yourself and just allow whatever comes through to come through. You know, when I'm acting, if I'm going into a scene that like requires me to, let's say, have a certain emotion, I have to empty myself of whatever emotion I had that day. I have to be present and just trust, you know? And I think for me with writing this book, every time I sat down to write, I prayed before I did it, and I was like, God, use me. Like, what do you want me to say? What's the story that you want me to tell? And there were days where I was like, I don't know what I'm writing. I don't know where this book is going. I don't know what it's about, or maybe I didn't like what I wrote that day, but I wrote anyway because I trusted that I was being used for something bigger than myself. And I believe that the universe and God is always trying to do that with all of us. It's trying to like use us. And so, yeah, I think my only responsibility was like showing up for it and making myself available. And I will also say that I worked with a phenomenal coach. My aunt, she is a mentor to me. She's a coach. She's incredible. She's an acting coach, but she also teaches the metaphysics of life and scene structure and character objectives and scene arcs. And you realize like this, it's all the same thing, even though they're two different art forms. You know, if I had to figure out a scene starts this way, but I need it to end this way, you know, what is the journey that my character is going to go on? That's the same question I have to ask myself when I go in and look at a script, right? Like, what is the emotional journey of this character? What do they want? What do they want more than anything? And I think the only thing different with a book is that you're doing it for multiple characters at the same time, you know?
Yeah,
Don't you
I
think? Because you
do.
have to tap into all of them and be like, well, what does this person want? And like, what
Right,
drives
because they all
them,
gotta like
you
be
know?
connected and make sense. Absolutely.
Right,
This
right,
makes me very curious about your process though. So like I would love to hear about your writing process because
right.
like
Oh my
mine
God.
is super meticulous. It does not change. It's the same for literally everything I do. So I would love to hear about yours. I'm sure everybody here would love to hear about your writing process.
Right. Yeah. Well, I wish it was as peaceful as maybe you're hoping it is, but it's a little bit sporadic. I like to like I like to I like to discipline myself by forcing myself to do it. So for example, I'll say to myself, Asha, you're gonna write from 9 to 12. Even if you don't know what you're writing, even if it's bad, just write from 9 to 12. You could take a break from like 1 to 3, come back from like 3 to 5. So I like to discipline myself in that way. And I love to have tea. I love tea. I'm a huge tea drinker. I'm huge into like herbs and like healing the body. So I'll always have like cups of herbs, sage, incense, crystals. Oh my gosh, crystals were huge, especially when I was writing the first draft of this book. I wore this like rose quartz crystal when I was living in Vancouver at the time I was writing. And I would just tell myself that every time I put on this crystal, I I write amazing. God speaks through me. I am in the flow. Like I would just tell myself that every time I would put on the
I love
crystal.
it.
I don't know if it was actually working, but it convinced me. So
I mean,
yeah.
clearly it was. You pulled out a banger. Like, look, let
Right.
me go get me a rose quartz. Like,
Right.
make sure I'm channeling this energy as well.
Right though. Totally.
Yeah. But so
Wow.
another thing that I really love is the relationships in this book. Like I can tell that you are a person who understands how people function and the
Right.
importance of relationships. I will not lie to you, Mia is like my favorite.
Oh wow. I
And
love
I
that.
think there's something about this like snarky little sister
Right.
that she brings a different facet to the story. Do you have a sister?
I do. Yes. I have
Is,
two.
is your relationship similar? Like how did the Tilla Mia thing, how does that factor into like your own life? I mean, clearly the dynamic,
Right.
it's so one of my favorite things about that dynamic was that
Sorry.
Tilla's relationship to Tyson was very
Right.
different from Mia's. And
Right.
so I want to know like where that came from, especially as a person who has two
Absolutely.
sisters.
Yeah, my sister would not like for me to say that it was inspired by her. And I don't think so because Mia's definitely different from my sister, but I will say that what I love so much about Mia is how authentic she is, and I think in a lot of ways that's what Tilla is striving for. She has this like authenticity to the she doesn't care if what she says offends you because she's standing in her truth at every moment. And I love that so much. And I would say that my sister does that a lot. I think that my sister definitely is the type of person where she stands in her truth and she says how she feels, and I admire that about her. Like she doesn't really care how people receive it. It's more just like, you know, she speaks what's true for her. And so I think that part, but definitely not like my sister's a lot sweeter, I think, than Mia.
Dude, Mia's great. I was like, oh, I
Yeah,
like this little girl. So
she's
I want
feisty.
you to, she's so
Yeah,
feisty and she is she's very strong, right? And I
right,
think about the way that Tilla's relationships all serve a different purpose. They all have a different function in her life. Like her relationship to her mom is one thing, her relationship to Tyson is one thing, her relationship to these different boys is one thing, her
right.
relationship to Mia is one thing, her relationship to her aunt is another thing. How do like when you're thinking of building out a character's journey, why is it so important to you to have these relationships shine so brightly on the page? Because they do.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I think because they're real. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I spent, as I said, summers in Jamaica, and the people that I spent time with were the most robust and lively and alive and like God driven, spirited. happy people, like, you know, especially when I think about the relationships with the cousins and the kids that would roam the island and go on all these adventures. Like, to me, they are the heart of the island, and that's more than anything what I wanted to capture. But I thought it was important because I was like, these relationships are real, and whether it's her relationships with Andre or the boys or her father or Mia, I wanted it to just feel so real. I wanted people to read it and be able to see themselves in the pages. And if they couldn't see themselves, I would want them to experience something new, especially when I think about like the boys and all that stuff. Yeah, it was important to me to make sure that that was done authentically.
You nailed it. You really did.
Thank you,
But no,
Nic.
seriously, like I think about my own relationship to my father. Like, and my father and I have a fantastic relationship. He is my biggest cheerleader and like literally my number one fan.
Right.
But watching the way, like seeing Tilla's openness to Tyson, despite him being like not the best guy, like there was something so beautiful about that. And it made her so beautiful, so beautifully well-rounded, right? What I will say is that this book also gave me a completely different picture of Jamaica. And I want you to talk a little bit about this, right? Because you decided to set this book in a part of Jamaica that most people will never visit.
Right.
Why?
Because like just going back to the people, like when I tell you, when I would go to Jamaica, Nic, it felt like entering another world. It literally felt like peeling back the curtains of like a tropical, jungly wonderland, like a whole nother way of operating. There's a line in the book where Diana says to Tilla, they're talking about Beyonce, and she's like, I don't know who that is. And I've heard people be like, that's not possible. But no, that was a real conversation I had with someone there, you know, at the time, because we're talking 2007, like, you know, back then, it was a completely different world. Technology wasn't what it is now. So much of it was far removed. And I just think it's an experience like no other. And I think because it was so routine for me, like I would go every summer, as I said, I always was like, how do more people not know about the beauty of the island? So often we see this like depiction of the Caribbean, and it's so standard. Like we don't actually see the lives of these people. And it was important for me to kind of dive into that more, you know, and show that representation because it's there. And I also think that it's funny, I say this a lot too. It's like in Western culture, we're kind of spoiled. Like we forget that there's so many realities happening outside of our own. You know what I mean? Yeah, and they're just as valid, you know, they're just as valid experiences and realities. And so, yeah.
One of the things I liked about the fact that this was set on the island of Jamaica is that, like, as a person who frequently is tasked with writing about racism, you didn't really have to do that. So you got to dig into these other issues. Classism was a huge one. Sexism is a huge one. Colorism was a big one. And I want to know why did you decide to lean into, first of all, was having it set in Jamaica, do you feel like it freed you up from having to talk about specific things? And did it also require you to touch on other things? Does that question make sense?
I kind of, so you're saying like specific things like racism, like did it free me up from having to address, right? Yeah. And isn't that the case though, when we travel to the islands, it's like we can just be.
Yeah, but it also forced you to address some other stuff, right? So like
exactly.
The things that you did have to address, why were you drawn? So like you were, like I said, classism was one, colorism, sexism. Like those are the three that I think those are the three that stood out the most to me. And I want to know why you felt drawn to those particular issues. Issues.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Colorism, I've always been so perceptive of. Ever since I've been a child, I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've been on the receiving and the not so great end of the stick, you know, being in the middle. And also I have the privilege, my father, he's mixed with gray eyes, you know what I mean? And so seeing that experience and what that looks like for him, you know, versus my uncle, or, you know what I mean? It's just like, I have every shade in my family. And I think that being in the middle allowed me to have this perception towards colorism, not in my family, by the way, but in media, you know, being an actress, going on roles and constantly being told, you know, you're not dark enough, or you're not light enough, or you're not ambiguous enough. Constantly, again, it really all goes back to constantly not booking, which is so funny because I believe that like the greatest thing that that brings us pain is often our greatest source of power. And so much of my pain came from not booking. And it was like, why is it not working? And I would see, you know, more ambiguous girls booking roles over me. And I just was always very perceptive to it. And I was like, we need to have a larger conversation about what this is, you know? And so colorism I've always been drawn to, just because I think it's odd, especially when we talk about racism and Black Lives Matter. Colorism goes hand in hand with that. It's,
Absolutely.
you know, the remnants of colonialism. Let's address it all if we're going to address it, you know? So to me, that's always been something my family can tell you I'm very passionate about that topic. And I also think too, as a Black woman, having darker skinned cousins and stuff, like, it's so easy for people to label dark skinned women as angry if they want to speak about these topics. And so I feel a responsibility as an ally, being kind of in the middle. Like, I feel like it's my job to speak up and amplify the voices of my Black sisters, you know, my African sisters. Like, yeah, so that was colorism. Sexism and classism, I think, are just a natural result of the colonialism that took place on the island. And so Jamaica is steeping with that, especially when you go into, you know, these more rural places. And I just thought it was important to talk about, because again, there's so many other things happening outside of our own bubble in Western culture, you know? So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
No, it's fantastic. It's a really great answer. I have two more, and then we'll open the floor to questions from other people. The first one is, I won't spoil the ending, obviously, but it's very realistic. And I want to know, like, as a person who also obviously writes books, I often feel a pressure to make sure that the ending, like,
right,
does somebody get a happy ending? Like, there's this pressure, especially as a person writing books about people who don't typically get books written about them.
Right.
How did you feel when it came to writing the ending of this book? And are you happy with the choice you made?
I'm really happy with the choice I made. I think the truth is that Hurricane Summer deals with a lot of stuff that it would have been great to have 600 pages to like go through it, you know, but I have an incredible editor who never really put that pressure on me to have a happy ending. And that was great because I didn't want one. And I felt like, you know, going back to like, I feel we have a responsibility to be honest about all these things like sexism, colorism. We also have a responsibility to be honest about life. And so many times, so many of us, we never get a happy ending. You don't get the apology that you're looking for. We don't get, you know, the closure that we seek, or our parents don't just one day open up and tell us why they did all the things they did, you know. And at the end of the day, it's not their responsibility to. And I think that that was a big part of Tila's journey in understanding forgiveness, and also understanding that forgiveness can happen even when you don't have the perfect happy ending. You know, forgiveness is something you do for yourself to free yourself. It has nothing to do with anybody else, you know? And again, that's my own life experience and having to come to that conclusion for myself. And it was powerful for me to write that in the book, because I think when it comes to parental like wounding, and, you know, for all of us, we have parental wounds, even if we had the best of parents ever. But it's the original wound, you know? My Aunt Ingrid always says that. She's like, it's the original wound, and it's our job to clean it up. Your happiness is your responsibility and no one else's. And I think that that sometimes can sound harsh and also be hard, because forgiveness is a complicated and messy thing. But once you have that awareness, the power that you give yourself, and you realize, wow, like it's all me. I just have to accept me. I just have to love me. I think that's like the biggest lesson, you know, and something I'm learning every day. I've been mastering.
You're like utter magic. I just want to like sit and listen to you talk. No, seriously, like there's so many things that you're saying that it took me, you were like 26?
Yeah.
So I've got you about 10 years. And it took me up until like last year to learn some of the things that you're saying.
A lot of
because
Oprah.
You're so
Lot of Oprah.
Look, Oprah be on it, man. Oprah,
a lot of
she's
Super
been on
Soul
it for
Sunday.
a while.
Right.
She's been on it for a while.
I probably just started earlier than you with that Oprah, because that'd be Super Soul Sunday.
Like Oprah, we just listen. We glean from the queen.
Right.
Yeah. So last question for me is twofold. Number one is there another book in the works? And number two is like, are you going to write for the screen?
Oh, great question. My goal with this book from the beginning was for it to be a movie. Point blank, period. I wrote it as a screenplay.
I can see it.
Right? I wrote it as a screenplay, and then I was like, let me try to write this as a book. So absolutely, my goal is to have this become a film. And in terms of writing for the screen, yes, why not? Yes, I will be writing for the screen. Yes. And I'm working on my second book right now. And I'm really excited about it. Yeah, I'm still in like the early phases, but it takes place in Jamaica again, which is really exciting, but it takes place in the 1970s. And that has been an interesting thing, but it explores themes, I think, in such a beautiful way, especially classism and colorism. Again, actually, it kind of chronicles throughout like the Manly era, where like socialism, it was like the island was very divided about which direction they wanted to go, and so it's going to follow the lives of two girls growing up during that time. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited about that.
I'm excited about it too, hearing about it. I'm like, let me know when that will be available for me to read.
Absolutely.
Because I'm gonna need to read it.
Absolutely.
So you are an absolute delight, and I'm sure people have like plenty of questions here to ask you.
I have a question for you though, Nic, because you have been just so wonderful. I want to know, like, if for you reading it, who was your favorite character? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, what stuck out to you?
Mia was my favorite character. And I think, I don't know, it might be like an old lady who's a mom thing, but there was something about her, her authenticity. Like, I mean, obviously everybody in this book was super authentic, but it was like this, she was 9. And it was very clear that she's this 9-year-old girl.
Right.
There's
like
something about that age. Yeah. But there's something about that age where the old soul is there, but it's also like, I'm gonna say what I gotta say. And she, honestly, I'm like, I want to be like Mia when I grow up. Truly.
Right. It's that age. It's like just before you forget what you already know. You know truth when you're that age, and it's like then you become Tilla and you forget it,
and you
then
start
you have to
asking questions.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I totally feel that. Thank you for explaining and expanding.
You nailed it, girl. Like, I'm super proud. I'm not even gonna lie. Like,
thanks,
welcome
man.
to the commercial, to the contemporary YA space. I'm so glad that you are here.
It's an honor to be here. I'm so excited. It's fun. It's fun.
Sometimes. Keep that same energy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right. Well, we are sure that everybody has a ton of questions. Did you want them to use the chat, or did you want to see faces and hear voices?
I mean, either works. I see a hand up already. Maya's hand is up.
Yeah.
We would love to see your face.
Yeah, Maya, if you want to go ahead and turn your camera on and unmute
you don't
yourself.
have to turn your camera on, but like if you, if you want to.
Yes, that's true.
Hi, Maya.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
You look great, girl. Yes.
Yeah, like you came to
you knew she was turning her camera on
at this evening event. Okay.
Yes.
Guys, thank you. Appreciate that. I just wanted to say I'm so happy to be here tonight, and I'm feeling really inspired because I am a writer from Toronto, and I'm also writing about the Black Canadian experience. And I pre-ordered your book months ago, and I just started reading it, and it's really resonating with me a lot. And so I just really wanted to thank you for writing this, because I'm querying right now and like having to go through that process of approaching agents. It's pretty brutal, especially when you're a person of color and you're trying to figure out, do they not like it because of my writing or because they don't see space for people who look like me in publishing, and trying to figure that out. So I just wanted to get your take on how you kind of navigated that, the differences between the publishing world and like what you experienced in Hollywood with some of the roles that you said weren't really showing your full humanity. So if you want to talk a little bit about that and maybe give me a little bit of advice, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Maya, thank you so much, first of all, and congratulations on your book. That's so exciting. And we're from Toronto. I'm from Ajax, admittedly, but you know, but yeah, I mean, my process into getting a book made was so stressful up until I, sold it. But finding an agent and the rejection, and like finding an editor and the rejection, and it's like you put your heart out there. So I totally feel you. And all I can really offer you is just know that like it's a part of it. And I know everybody says that, but like just know I got a lot of rejection, like a lot, way more than any yeses that I got. And you know, I feel like everything happens for a reason. Like, I'm a huge believer in that. And so the advice that I would say is just really trust, especially if you know what your message is, you know what your purpose is, and you're clear on what, you know, you want to put into the world and what you're being called to do. I think it's more believing in that. And that's something that I'm reminding myself every day, leaning into that, because not everybody's going to have the vision that you do. Not everybody's going to see what you see. You know, that dream and vision wasn't put inside of them, it was put inside of you. And it's so hard to get people to see that. I relate. And just keep going and trust. Like, you got it, and it's going to happen in the perfect way for you. Do you have any advice, Nic, on that?
Yo, word. That's my only addition. It's like, you know, it only takes one yes is the one thing that I would say. Like, same experience, hella rejection on every front. And then even after your book comes out, you still deal with rejection because not everybody's gonna like it, right? But keep pushing. Don't give up. The first book published for me was the third one I wrote.
Right.
So
yeah. It's hard. It is hard, but it is worth it, and you will get there. I think that's like the biggest thing, just remembering, like, don't get distracted by the noise, because not everyone's going to see your vision, but the right person will. The right person will.
Thank you.
Wisdom,
thank you so much to both of you.
Wisdom.
Yeah. So
really
good talking to you, Maya. Thank you for your question. Thanks for coming.
And thanks, of course, and thank you for talking a little bit about colorism as well and representing that, because that's a little bit represented my story in the world of dance and ballet. So thank you for doing that. And because it's like, because of that, I can kind of like have, when I talk to agents and editors, it's like, this is something people want to see talked about. So it makes a difference. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. That means everything.
Good luck, darling. You are going to,
you got it.
Fine.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Thank you.
All right. And Latasha has her hand up. So if you want to turn your camera on, don't have to, no pressure.
She's ready too.
Nic already. I'm not camera ready, but whatever. It's a long day, and I work with children, so Nic knows. Letitia.
Letitia? Okay.
Yeah.
I see an E.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
It's okay. Trust me. I've had a lot of different pronunciations. It comes with the territory. So I'm a New Yorker, and I'm of Caribbean descent. I'm half Trinidadian, half Haitian. And I grew up around a lot of Jamaicans. So like, I'm used to hearing patois. So I was wondering, because the glossary is a really exhaustive glossary. And I was just
right.
What was the choice behind that? Because, you know, like, a lot of times it's such a context thing that, like, when you hear it spoken, it's so many different ways that it can mean that I was like wondering why, like, how come the glossary was so exhaustive?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to cover my bases, and I knew that if I was going to write a story that took place in Comfort Hall, that you can't get around the language. You know, if I was writing a story in Kingston, maybe I could like water it down here and there, but I feel like the magic of the story is the language. And I kind of accepted that as I was writing, that like maybe not everyone would get it. And at first, you know, my editor and I, we weren't really sure how we wanted to tackle it. Like, should it be an index? Should it be a glossary? But, you know, I got really lucky in the sense that, as I said, I have a badass editor, Sarah Goodman. She's amazing. And taking out the language or watering it down, it was never a question. It was just like, okay, we're doing this. And like, let's just make sure they have the information that they need to understand what's happening. But yeah, I knew it was a risk, but I just knew that there was no story without the language, because it's the melody of the people, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, if you talk to any Jamaican, it's a very colorful conversation.
Right.
It could be something super depressive, but like, it's going to be colorful. My sister was engaged to a Jamaican, so I'm like, I'm super used to them. And so it's just like, okay, I was just wondering, like, because it is so long, I'm like, oh, I know these things, but I'm so used to just kind of getting it in the moment that
totally. I mean, I was like, I knew it was going to be a diverse readership, and I think it's kind of cool too to like have it out there and have it be like in print, like Jamaican language, Caribbean language. We deserve that too, you know?
I agree.
So yeah, thanks for your question.
No problem.
Thanks, Letitia. And Ileana, I hope I I don't have my glasses on, so all the letters kind of mush together.
Mushed together.
Exactly. Ileana, if you want to turn your camera on, you are invited to. There she is.
Okay, so my question is, and many kids my age now, we don't really read books because we find them. Right now, there's a lot of people who don't do interesting books that really call our attention to what the things we want to talk to about right now. But as teenagers, sometimes we don't know how to express ourselves in writing. What would be your advice if we want to start writing?
Wow. That's a great question. Hi, Ileana. Thank you for coming. I just think trust. I remember being like 12 and I would just be like in my bed writing and I knew it wasn't that good, but I still wrote anyway. I feel like you just have to trust yourself because everybody has an authentic voice and it's going to sound differently for everyone. So I think just getting out of that judgment space, don't think about, how does this sound or how does it sound in compared to something I read? Just trust that there's an authentic voice that you have that's valid just because you wrote it, just because you decided to write, that is your voice.
I love it. Yeah. I'm going to add to that. And I'm going to say that, like,
Please.
first of all, you are beautiful, girlfriend. Just
Yes.
beautiful. But you get to decide what you believe about yourself, right? And I do remember.
Can you say that again? Can you say that again?
Yeah,
That's
you
huge.
get to decide what you believe about yourself. And I remember being 16, 17 and believing what other people said about people my age. And then one day deciding, like, wait a minute, I actually am pretty thoughtful. I do think critically. Like, I'm not stupid. I'm doing very smart things. And deciding to believe those things over what the adults were saying about me really went a long way.
Right.
So leaning into that and recognizing that, like, the people who have ideas about you aren't always right. That's one of the easiest ways for you to get into the space where you just get to express yourself freely.
That's a word. Absolutely. That's the key to life right there.
All right. And there was a funny comment. I don't know if anybody else has questions.
Thank
Not
you.
really a funny comment, but I thought this was really kind of described the reading experience of this book. And it was from Letitia. I had the most emotionally exhausting therapy session after I finished this book. And I think that's, an important point of discussion because, it is those books that really resonate with our souls that we're going to carry around with us. And that's what this book has done. And, how I know that as you come as you release a book out into the world, you want it to have those same, to have that effect on people.
Right.
How is it for you to now feel that this book is here and this is what you're hearing and seeing from everybody?
Right. Honestly, it's been beautiful because I feel like I have been forced to confront so much about myself. I was saying to Nic, before this conversation, feelings of needing external validation or wanting people to love it. You sort of have to surrender all of that. And you have to just be confident that it's good because you wrote it. The job is done. Now it's time to write the next thing. And really, and again, it goes back to the belief of like believing in what you're being called to do, believing in the things you're passionate about, believing in yourself and your work, So there's a huge part of me that's like, I believe that this book can offer a lot of people catharsis or healing because I had to find my own healing to write it. So I know that like the medicine is there and I hope that it resonates with people. But I also had to, I'm learning that I also have to surrender that control and know that like not everyone's going to love it and that's okay. But the people that it's meant for will find it and hopefully, it'll mean something to them. So yeah, it's up and down, but it's beautiful because it really goes back to that self-acceptance and deciding who you are and what you think, and what's important to you, like validating that for yourself and knowing that you get to decide, and feel good.
Yeah. It's spot on. Yeah. And Letitia has another question. And I think, Letitia, you will be our last question for the evening.
I was going to extend on that. So I had also said that I think it's something with Caribbean men. and like their children, because my father is Haitian, and the way that Tilla looked at her father is how I used to look at my dad. And I think as I got older, that shifted a lot.
Mm,
And there's like a lot of unresolved issues. So, like, some of the things she went through with her father, his tone, so I was triggered like a lot. So I was
right.
like, oh my God, so it took me longer to get through because of all the triggers that were going off. But it
Mm,
also reminded me that I had things that I needed to work on, especially
right.
because I've been wanting a relationship with my dad, and I've been trying to be more brave about it. So that was why, like, I had such an exhausting, like, I mean, I hadn't cried that hard in so long, like in a
Wow.
therapy session, but I walked away from it tired but glad to have gotten it off of my chest. And
Wow.
we don't think about the fact that, like, there's another layer with Caribbean men, that we don't think about the fact that they were in one country and they're coming to another country and they're experiencing a whole nother set of shit that, like, pardon my language, that we don't think about because we were born here or in whatever country it is. My
Right.
father came here when he was 5.
Wow.
So, and my grandfather came over here first and left them in Haiti. It's a whole thing, that there's so many things that we have to peel back. So, like, black being a black man, being a black immigrant man, being a father, and all these other things that,
Right.
like, you're thinking about, okay, where does that impact me? Where do I fall into this spectrum? And my relationship, how does that deal with that? So that's why it was so exhausting, but
Right.
I was glad to have had that. I was very
Right.
glad to have had that and had to have that lifted, in a sense, off of me. So
That is like the highest compliment, and not even compliment. I'm so grateful to hear that you connected with it in that way. And it's generational trauma, like Nic, we were saying before, like escaping to the islands doesn't mean that we all don't have to deal with the realities of like slavery and colonialism, these
mhm,
traumas. My aunt said to me the other day, she always reminds me, Asha, like, it wasn't long ago we were beaten, we were castrated, we were muzzled, not very long ago,
mhm,
treated like property. And these things have residual effects in households, throughout
Yep.
generations, throughout relationships, and it impacts families. And I loved what you said, because so much of my own healing has come from realizing that, like, dealing with the shadow and looking at those dark parts of ourselves and realizing that they're not that scary once we face them, and that we actually have everything we need to face them. It's just making that decision and shift to be like, I'm going to look at this part of myself, or this part of my relationship with my parents or my siblings, whoever, that doesn't work for me, and let me address, like, what is it that I feel inside? What is it? And honestly, a huge part of this was inner child work. I think doing that inner child work and realizing what the inner child needs, and then realizing that you can be that for your inner child. You can be the love that they always needed. You can be the support. You can be the parent for your inner child. And I think that is the lesson of forgiveness, truly, because it's like, you don't need the other person to do everything right. You just need to know that the power was always yours. You know what I mean? Like, we're so powerful as humans, and I'm passionate about that and exploring that. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the like self-help book you're gonna write
Yeah.
pretty soon here. So just putting that bug in your ear. Get on
Yes,
it. Thank
I'm
you.
here for it. I'm
I'm
here
gonna
for it.
second that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
As
Uh,
long as Nic will do the forward.
okay,
Absolutely.
I'm gonna second that.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What an
Um,
honor.
you guys, I don't know about anybody else, but I could sit here and listen to Asha and Nic just go on all night. But unfortunately, we can't. Asha, thank you again so much for this book. You talk a lot about how you talked about it in your letter that was in the advanced copy. I don't know if it made it into the finished copy.
Mhm.
About how you wanted this book to be a source of healing for everybody. And I think that those of us that are here tonight that have read it can absolutely attest to the fact that it absolutely does that. It helps us. And I think Letitia just said it so well. it might trigger us, but it's going to help us push through to get to the
Right.
other side,
Right.
to find that hopefulness. And I know you said you didn't want a happy ending, and it wouldn't have been an authentic book if you had given this a happy ending, but you gave it a hopeful ending. And I think that one of the most powerful passages that I read in this book was that last paragraph. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want it to
No
be
spoilers.
right.
Thanks, guys. When I tell you I wrote and I rewrote and I went back, and at that last paragraph, I'm sure you can relate, Nick. Closing out a book is tough.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know,
for
like
me-
beginnings and endings are like tend to be the easiest parts for me. It's
For
like
you?
filling out the middle. I'm like, oh
Right.
boy, something has
That
to
part
happen
too.
between these 2 points. Dang it.
Right. That's funny.
But I think that last paragraph is just exquisite. I went back and reread that. I'm not exaggerating, a half a dozen times when I finished the
Wow.
book, because it
Oh.
just really just puts you in the right space that you need to be in, and
Right.
get you ready to look at your life when you leave this book. So thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Yeah.
That is like the highest compliment and honor. You ladies are so wonderful. It was such an honor to be able to do this. And, you know, I get it, because it's like, it was the message I needed too. So I totally relate. And I'm just grateful that, you know, you saw it as well. It means a
Yeah.
lot.
And I know you talked a lot about, God working through you with this book and leading you on the path that you needed to be on. And I can't wait to see what you have next coming, the next book,
Hard
because,
same.
right? Yeah.
Thank you.
This is what you were born to do.
Thank
You know, this is what you were born to do. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you,
You're welcome.
ladies.
Now, I am going to
Really.
invite anybody that wants to turn their camera on, as we're getting ready to wrap things up, just so that you can wave and Asha can see who all was here tonight. If you feel comfortable, please turn on your cameras now. And
Thank you guys for all the great questions too. Hi.
and thank you guys all for coming, because again, like I said,
Really.
without you all being here, we wouldn't have a book to celebrate. So you guys are the reason that Asha is writing. You're the reason that we're celebrating this book. So thank you all so much.
Thank you all for reading. Yes. Thank you all so, like, it means everything. Thank you for reading.
Oh,
Can you imagine you put all that work in and no one reads it? It's like, it's about the readers, you know? So
Look, I
thank
have
you.
moments when I'm like totally fine with nobody. I'm like, I hope nobody reads this.
Yeah.
Don't worry. You will absolutely get there where you could be like,
Yeah.
oh no, I really don't want
Like, oh,
anybody to
no.
read this one.
Oh, too
All right.
funny.
Well,
thank you all
everybody-
so much, though. Thank you, Nick. Such a joy.
Yeah.
And those
Yes.
earrings, girl, you're gonna have to tell me where you got them. So beautiful.
Asha.
They're
Yes.
gorgeous.
All right, everybody
All right.
have a good night.
Yes,
Have a
thank you
great
all
night,
so much for
everyone.
coming, Nick and Asha.
Thank
you
you.
so much. Good
Bye,
luck.
everyone.
Congratulations. 2-star
Thank
reviews
you.
already. Yep.
Yay! Hurricane summer. Yay!
Yeah. Yay.
Thank you guys.
Get it.
Take
Right.
care.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Have a good rest
Bye,
of your
y'all.
week, everybody. Bye.